Hello and welcome to the Quantum Bridge again from a sunny day in England, I would say, which is quite nice. We won't spend too long nattering about the weather, like we might do or we did off camera. But I will pass over to Casper to introduce our returning guest today, please.
Thank you. How are you, Gary? You all right?
I'm good, thank you, mate. Yeah, busy weekend, but it's all good. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, it's a brand new world on a Monday.
Mm.
Anyway, without further ado, as Gary said, we're very, very pleased to welcome back a returning guest, Magalie. Magalie, hi. How are you doing?
Hi, Casper. Hi, Gary. Nice to see you again.
Likewise.
Now, Magalie spoke to us about her sort of world of moon herbs in the first recording. I urge people to go back and watch that because we covered a lot of interesting territory during that, and maybe quite a lot of unexpected aspects, not least the idea of actually talking with the herbs and the plants themselves. And I'd like to delve a little bit more deeply into that because I feel that this intuitive side of it, the intuitive wisdom, maybe the witch-like aspect of it, which I quite enjoy as well, could be expanded on. So, Magalie, would you mind sort of just touching on that whole area of sort of your intuitive sense and maybe even the actual hearing of the words from the various plants and herbs that you use in your treatments? And you can go anywhere with this you like, but I just thought that might be a nice starting point.
Yes, sure. So I think last time we talked a tiny bit about it. And I was actually pondering on this morning whilst I was with the horses. That because that can be mystified a little bit, the idea of, okay, well, I'm talking to a plant or talking to a tree, or is it true, is it not, are we imagining it, or is it really happening, or and so on. And so it's a good good topic to dive into. But I think what's really important to kind of start when you want to enter into this kind of intuitive field is the relationship that one has to oneself. Because before going into meeting a plant or meeting anyone, we kind of have our own filters and our own projections. So for me, the work really starts with the kind of healing of oneself, of our own trauma, our own luggages, our own anxiety, all of that. Because it's very, very difficult to distinguish at the start whether we are hearing a plant or whether we're imagining it, simply because we have so many thoughts and ideas going in our head on a daily basis, and especially in this kind of really, really fast pace of living. So even starting with the intuition of thinking, is there a danger here, or is this me being anxious? And that's very hard for most people to make the difference. Am I actually, is a bad decision for myself, or am I being triggered, and am I overthinking this? So I myself realized that before I could really go into a trust that I was really feeling the plant and having a dialogue with it, I needed to shed my traumas, and you can't, this is a whole lifetime journey. You probably can't go through all of them, but there are layers and layers. And it really started there. So I did a lot of various therapeutic work for myself, group work, birth into being, even talking therapy. I did a lot of things to kind of shed the layers. I used a little bit of human design as well, which is that's birth chart. And all of these different tools kind of started to put me on the path and bring trust, bring trust in myself of who am I, and then starting to distinguish when a voice. So when I say voice, again, this is very different for everyone. Some people see colors, it's a bit like the memory. Some people have different type of memories. And when you go into these fields of inner visions, people see colors, others might just have feelings, others might actually have visceral feelings in their body, others might hear words, others actually see very clear scenes. We're all very, very different. So I think it's really important to say that, because I might hear words and somebody might have a completely different experience. And it doesn't matter. It's just the way we're wired. But what's really important is to distinguish when this is an outside thing talking, or if it's me, if it's my own voice or my own. And I think for me, so the first part was distinguish anxiety. So I know anxiety is a very loud thing. It overtakes, it's overrides someone. Is that for me, that's my own feeling. You know, if I'm not sure about a situation and it's really, really almost like an obsession, like I can't stop thinking about it, then I know to make space for it, and I just observe myself in that state. And it's not about blowing it away, it's about just surrendering to it. Okay, this is how I'm feeling. And when it's something more outside, or if it's a channeling, what I call channeling, when I feel it's something else, it will be very subtle, very subtle. It probably won't repeat a lot. It probably won't be dominating or anything like that. It just feels like a very gentle breathe almost. I mean, this is just my own felt experience. And so that's just in life, yeah, generally. And then, so when I am going to go and feel a plant or meet a plant, mostly for patients, you know, nowadays, it's going to be a very, very similar exercise, but it will start with a place where I've done a little bit of breathing work to kind of switch off. You want to switch off your cortex, really important. We've got 3 brains. We've got reptilian, cortex, and limbic. And the cortex is the one that's, you know, the driver. It drives, it's very rational, it's very logical. It's very good at drawing stories of why we're thinking this or feeling this. But it's great, but it can be really disruptive when you want to do that kind of work, or when you want to work in your emotions and traumas. It's because it just keeps you in the story. And when you want to work with a plant, it's a little bit like the animal worlds. If you see animals, they're very much with their limbic reptilian brain most of the time, and they're in the present, right? So they just use their breath, they use very subtle little signs, and we have to relearn how to do that, because we've got this whole emotional field that can, with the cortex together, take us away from being in the present. So yeah, breathing is a really good way, because you start switching off your sympathetic system, which is a side of the nervous system, and you activate more your parasympathetic system, and so you can go into these kind of different wavelengths of relax. And then you access the other 2 brains, are more the animal brains. You know, the reptilian is all about survival, about what you need right now, like thirst, hunger, and the limbic will be more around emotions and desires, but more in sense of, you know, what your heart wants to do. And yeah, these 2 brains are very important. The same as when women birth, or, you know, you need to be in that kind of without the cortex, like you need to override that to really be present and let your body take over. So with the plants, yeah, the breath is really important. Having done some inner work, the willingness, because it's also in order to shed trauma and, you know, this kind of whatever luggage that we carry, we have to be willing. And I say it sounds obvious, but it's quite common for someone to say, and myself included, oh yes, I do want to get better, and I don't want to be in this state anymore. And so that's one part speaking, but we have another silent part, which is really strong, who is not willing to let go of, you know, we actually don't want to do the work. So it's kind of finding that way of bringing harmony between all these parts. And then it takes time. It's not, you know, one exercise, and it's a very slow, gentle process. And it's a fine-tuning. And I think it's really a philosophy of living. So it's not, I'm going to plug the switch and then unplug it back, because this is what we do on a daily life to kind of cope with the stress factor. We just switch off, right? And we go into this kind of, I call it unawake state, because it helps us get through. But to talk to a plant or to be in this full state of presence, we have to be in a full state of trust and acceptance. And that only happens from a place where we're fully plugged in the life, fully, accepting that whole spiral, which is not about good, bad. It's everything is going to be present, happiness, sadness, anger, calm, all of it. So it's at the start, it's a huge exercise. It's very vulnerable, actually, very, very vulnerable, because we have to crack ourselves fully open. And I think the other part is why it's a philosophy of life is because when we do that, we start seeing signs. We start finding signs on the path, and these signs, once we see them and we observe them and we take them on board, then the outcome of it or whatever happens becomes a validation that we are now able to see and hear things. It could be very little signs, and I'll have to find a story later. I haven't got one right now, but to kind of know that this is not starting to actually really channel or hear things. And then when that happens, so it becomes like almost an everyday thing. Sitting with a plant, it just becomes, it's the same. You just sit and you start looking at it, and it's a very, at the beginning, it's, and maybe one time we should do that I'd be happy to bring a plant, and maybe the three of us could be in a room together and start that exercise, because even the very starting point, when someone comes here or a little group comes, and for the first time we hold a little plant and we start looking at it very closely, it's nothing mysterious. We just look at it and start describing what we see. What does that look like and what could that be? And we use all our senses to do that. The vision, the touch, the smell, the taste, all of the senses, and then the sixth sense, of course. And what's also fascinating is to do it when a whole room is blindfolded, and you bring that plant and people start describing things that are very meaningful to the actual person in the room. And so it's a very cool meeting. And first, it's a bit like, when you meet someone at a bar, I want to say, what's your name? And a bit like that. And you'll start noticing this person's hair color, their eyes, their behavior. You start making a picture of who they are, because we have this incredible capacity to do that. We do it subconsciously, actually. So we call that in with a plant, and we call it very consciously. We want to just go and start speaking of what we see and what we think this energy is. And so each person and each plant will bring different aspects. And I mentioned before in the previous podcast that we don't do labeling. So it's not about naming it. It's not about knowing what it's good for. It's just about really, in this moment, who is this plant? What person could it be? And some people can travel instantly in a childhood memory with it. They immediately might have very vivid vision. Or some people even sometimes get this very acute trigger, with one plant, and collapse on the floor or start crying, or because something is happening. And it's just trusting that this is this plant and this person together in this moment, at work, at this kind of deep meeting. So words, some, but not for everyone. It's and what's really interesting, over doing this work over a period of time, is to notice that without the label, but certain plants will work on very specific fields. Like rose will bring out nostalgia out of quite a few people, or the nurturing aspect, or if lack of nurturing, then kind of the struggle of receiving love. For others, it will be, just beautiful, loving memories that they're craving for, people they're missing. And that's a very big thing for rose, for instance. And each plant can have slightly different energy, like lemon balm. It's interesting. People will bring this cooling and warming quality, which the plant has. the buzzing. They can hear the buzzing, which is it's a plant, the plant of the bee lemon balm. So without knowing what it is, it's all about that act of presence and relationship to oneself, as I was trying to explain at the start, which comes with work and time, you know. The more disconnected to ourselves, the harder it is to kind of be present, basically, because we have adopted a defensive mechanism to disconnect and disassociate.
Magalie, can I ask, what, if you can put it into words, what do you feel drew you towards the plants? Because, you know, a lot of people, when they're thinking, oh, I want to talk to, I don't know, aliens or someone that's passed, or, you know, because they want knowledge or insight or something, you know, what's going to happen. You know, but you've been drawn towards more nature and things here. Do you know why that is? Why you've gone down that path?
Well, yeah, I think so. The starting point, always had a dream that when I would be living on a farm with animals and nature and a garden, and I had that dream. I didn't know why. I didn't know what it meant. I just talked about it a lot, and then I forgot about it. You know, when I hit my teens, it just went. And you know, my parents both being psychiatrists for children, but they've always been into more natural organic food. And my grandparents on my mom's side were farmers. And there was little things, you know, as a child I probably didn't notice, but if I had a chest infection, they had this mustard linseed poultice they would apply on my chest. My mother always had a recipe for when I had a cold. I was kind of, you know, bathed slowly into it without, they were not herbalists, but, you know, and there was a few recipes from the family that were passed down. And then, well, I took a completely different life journey. I studied economics. I became a finance director, and that, you know, so all of that went. I still was using natural for myself, but I was in London. And then I got pregnant. And I think that's when the turning point happened. It was almost like a switch back into, hang on, what are you doing with your life? You know? And I remember, like, you're asking me this question right now, that I did this hypnobirth course with a lady, and she came to my house. And so at the time I had moved actually to a small flat with a garden, and I was adamant, and I started to grow things straight away. So, you know, it wasn't, it's a bit like what I was describing earlier. That wasn't my cortex. It was just my body went to get some seeds. I just followed something without realizing I was doing that. And she was in my kitchen and she said, oh, I think you're someone who needs to work with plants. And I mean, you know, people always have opinions, and it doesn't, but for some reason, those words really spoke inside somewhere. And I thought, yeah, I think so. I really, something went in when she said that. And then we moved to the country. I said to my husband, there's no way I can't raise a child in London. So while pregnant, we looked for a house, and I moved a month after my daughter was born, and this is the house we're in right now. So it was apparent. And so during that time, I started to do some birth into being trainings and work. And then as after moving here, immediately I was doing I was actually already doing herbal medicine in London a little bit, but just by myself. And then moving here, this was it. And I then looked into a herbal course. But actually, I remember, so this is the intuitive side of plants. I had an acupuncturist. She was a bit of a witch in London. And she mentioned, I said to her, after I give birth, I want to go on a plant course. After that lady said these things to me, and I was clear this is what I was going to do. And she gave me this book of Nathaniel Hugh, who is the herbalist who does intuitive school of herbalism, and I trained with him. And I saw his book, and I thought, that is the course I want to do. I mean, there was no doubt. And he's the one who talks a lot about talking to plants, meditating with plants, and releasing trauma through plant work. So, but his course was a course in person. You had to go on camp for a few days, and it was obviously not feasible for me and a newborn child. And I remember sending him an email, and he just never really replied. I mean, his course they still are very busy and demanded. So I then thought I'll just do an online herbalism course, which is more traditional. And anyhow, I felt it's probably easier because it's online and it's accredited by the NIM, which is the National Institute of Herbalists in the UK. So even though it's not 100% what I believe in, because it is still it's a beautiful course, but it is still very medicalized in that sense. You diagnose someone's condition. And so I did that first and then went to train with Nathaniel. But you see, it was a thread that was inside. I just wasn't aware, and it just woke up. And when it woke up, it was like, there is nothing else. It's like an urge. I have to do this. And when I moved here, I mean, being in London for about 15, 16 years, it's a lot of cortisol and adrenaline and, and fight and flight mode to undo. It took several years. But I could feel immediately being with the land, being, even if I'm walking around or looking at trees or, this was it, this was the only thing that could secure me, ground me. And then I remembered that as a child, I used to spend hours. So when we would go on holiday or anywhere, I would always spend hours in the woods, and I would go and talk to things. It used to be something I used to do all the time, actually. I just would spend hours and hours talking to things, seeing things. I'm pretty sure I was seeing fairies and things like that, and speaking to trees. And it was just I don't know when I lost it, but I used to do that for hours and hours as a child. I was an only child, and I spent hours by myself in the woods, wherever we went. So, yeah.
I resonate with that, being an only child, and also having that, certainly the attachment to trees. I remember, we probably hardly got any time, Gary, by the way, before I say anything more. Where are we at?
Okay, we haven't had the 10 minutes yet, so it's good.
Oh, okay, fine. I do remember something very significant in that sort of world and arena for me is when I was probably about 5 or 6 years old. We had a whole set of trees just outside our house, and we lived in a lower ground floor apartment, or first floor in the States maybe. Anyway, and there was a whole row of trees outside which were huge. I think they were probably elm trees actually. But anyway, to me as a small child, they were enormous, and I obviously had a great affection and affinity for those trees, because one morning I got up and those trees had been cut back. And not just cut back, but cut down, basically, to the point where they were never going to come back from what had happened to them. And I remember just bursting into tears when I saw that it hit me literally like being hit. And I think that many of us are refinding. The only reason I really mention that is that many of us are refinding these connections that aren't new, that are from childhood and probably before, right? So I think it's a very interesting and important thing you've touched on there, Magalie, that this refinding of our connection, and we can go back into past lives and all the other great stuff we probably don't have time for now, but this thing just of we seem to be in a timing, to me, of reconnection, and this type of sort of intuitive exchange between ourselves and the natural world, it seems to be part of this overall quote unquote ascension that we're going through. I don't know how you feel about that, or if that plays to any of your own feelings, but I thought I'd just mention.
I think so, and thank you for sharing about this beautiful connection you had with those trees. Yes, because I mean, we can always go into criticizing this modern world, and I mean, for me, this is it. We need to live with the day and age that we're in, right? And actually, one of the incredible, I think, advantage is because we live in this world of super fast change, super fast pace, we are all a lot faster into going deep as well. The evolution of each individual, the awakening can happen almost like this. It's just a switch to turn. And no disrespect to, like, because I am not part of any, you know, ashram or philosophies or anything like this, but I feel like generations ago, people had to go through so much hardship to awake, you know, whether being in the caves or, you know, the gurus, or they had to go through lengthy period of doing really, really, you know, hardcore journeys. I feel like nowadays it's actually almost at our doorsteps if we want to access it, because this is what where humanity is at. The level of consciousness and awareness is really heightened. Anyone can. It's nothing mystic. It's nothing. It's just different for everyone. It's not. There is no one book of instruction that is going to set, or, you know, it's not going to be. It's going to be a different experience for each person. And how do we find our core? You know, how do we find, oh, this is different, but of course it's, I think the starting point is that willingness to shed trauma, shed the luggage. I do work with past life, but actually, you know, Caspar, I think we have so much to do with this lifetime. It's not my first go-to.
I tend to agree
think
with you. Yeah.
if it comes up for someone, fine, it needs to be dealt with, but it's not something I go and push for. Just being here right now with what we've got, each of us, and all the different personalities, or, you know, little children of ourselves, as in our own younger self and younger parts, there's plenty enough to deal with. And yeah, so I think just that is enough, and anyone can do it. And the trees, you know, the trees are very beautiful actually plant to work with, very beautiful. It might be an easier entry point for some, because with trees, well, firstly, they usually have been here for many years, so their energies, you know, they have a big magnetic field compared to, you know, a little. I mean, it's very different the way you work. And, you know, they have like a kind of the where you meet a tree, you don't need to sit at the foot, you can even be 10 meters away, because usually, you know, the way the root will be the mirror of the height and the foliage and the spread of the foliage of the tree underground. So if you think about that, you know, the tree, actually you can feel that energy within 10 meters. You don't need to be right underneath, which is always interesting to start feeling. When do I start feeling the energy? It depends on the size. And yeah, they have, it's infinite wisdom, really, because, you know, they've been standing still in that place for so long. They've seen so much. So it's a really beautiful one to start with, to just and actually I think some people, they are communicating with the tree, they just haven't been aware of it. You know, it's and a bit like what you explained, that tree disappeared and you felt extremely sad because you'd been communicating with it, not even intentionally. You'd just been doing it.
Yeah, absolutely right. I remember, I mean, that is taking me back there. You are transporting me with those words and back to that moment. And it was a very difficult time, but I sort of have the good memories of prior to that, and how much, as you rightly point out, those trees were an intrinsic part of my childhood experience. Just seeing them and having them there was something that was part of my formative years, and hopefully I was giving back to them in some way. I do also remember seeing a tree actually not far from us in an area you'll know in Hertfordshire, where I was almost hit by that tree as well, i.e. hit by its energy field. And I'm not saying that I wouldn't notice that anyway occasionally, or say, oh, that's a wonderful tree, and sort of feel that aura, at least a level of aura. But this particular time, it was literally like it could have knocked me over. And I don't mean that in some sort of bland, sort of esoteric or whatever. I don't mean it in, I mean literally, it felt like a sheer force. Like, why haven't you noticed me before? Or you're not really seeing me. This is what I really am. Do you want to see what I really am? Well, this is what, you know, it was like that. And, you know, these are quite incredible moments in the sort of octave of taking us up. You know, or they're an invitation maybe to a higher dimensional sense, I think.
Yeah. Now you're running out of time.
Okay.
But thanks, Caspar. It's good to hear those insights. I think it's interesting. You got 3 ex-Londoners for whatever reason. I think Magalie covered some of that. And I find it interesting that as we're all going through a similar process, but we end up doing different things, you know, drawn to different areas, which is quite interesting. When Magalie's gone down that sort of plant thing, and I feel different stuff. I'm sure Casper feels drawn to other things that he's passionate about. And I will add, it does seem to be speeding up, because when I have my down moments, just call them that, I can clear things a lot quicker. So things that would have taken years or decades for me can be, you know, a day, well, maybe a week, but sometimes a few hours. And I'm like, wow, it's I managed to get rid of that quite quick. So it's interesting times. Yeah. But thank you again, Matt, for joining us, and hopefully another time we can continue the conversation.
Yeah, I think that has so much depth, Magalie. I wasn't expecting that, rather glibly talking about telepathy, and then you've really got into self-development and all of those other aspects that are so fundamental to what you do and where you're at and so on. So yeah, just thank you, and hopefully we can do some more of these.
With pleasure. And thank you for listening.
Thank you.
Pleasure.
Enjoy the rest of your sunny day.
You
Yeah.
too.
Take care.
Take care.
Bye.